Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 11 of the Mechanics of Poetry. We are now with background. And today's topic was brought up by Mr. James Coates, our good regular member here, and he wanted to know whether to self-publish or not to self-publish. Those are the questions. So we're going to cover every aspect of publishing today that we can possibly squeeze in. And of course, because James brought this up, he gets first dibs at saying whatever he wants to say about publishing, and then we'll take it from there. Go ahead, James.
Hi, everyone. So, I brought the question up because I'm, currently working on my third manuscript. My first two poetry collections I self-published online through Amazon's KDP application. And so we're coming to the third book, and it was particularly written to be published through a publisher. But since I haven't done it, I was interested in, the pros of going through a publisher, some of the challenge that may be associated with going through a publisher, and kind of what to expect, what a typical contract looks like, what typical offers as far as marketing the book looks like coming from a publisher. I can't speak about being self-published, doing it myself, the challenges of layout, of design. I do have a good design background, and so I designed the covers myself. I didn't outsource those. But I do know that there are, places like Fiverr where you can find designers to do things like layout, to do things like cover design. Amazon's pretty, consistent as far as doing like the back end stuff as far as the sales. So once you do market the book and someone's interested, they're pretty efficient on being able to get your book out to them in a timely manner, and then carrying out returns, charging the customer, and then about a month after the sale, they pay you your royalties on the books. I also, during the self-published route, had to build relationships with bookstores to have them carry my book in their store, and get sales that way. And also going through a lot of open mics and reading venues. I was part of a book fair several times where I got to go there, sell books there. So definitely the self-publishing route is a possibility. It just is a lot of hard work, a lot of marketing on your own, developing relationships, and kind of be the person in charge to get everything done. So I'm excited to see what happens possibly if I decide to go the actual published route for this particular manuscript coming up, Midnight in Mad Dreams.
Well, you covered a lot of bases there. I want to put this whole episode in slow motion so we can go over them one at a time.
Okay.
But before I do that, I want to give Mark a chance to say whatever he would like to say about publishing before I say too much.
Well, if we're talking about books, my first one was self-published, and I like the control, but of course, sales are virtually non-existent. So there's that. And then the rest of my chapbooks have been through your various chapbook publishing efforts. So I haven't actually done anything that's what the publisher. So I'm not sure what I can contribute, but the control and doing the design myself for that first one did let me experience all the aspects, and I did like being able to do everything. I'm just not sure I want to do it every time.
All right, thank you, Mark. You know, it's a long and winding road. It really is. So I better get started on the timeline. That's how I've got this organized. In the beginning, you're writing poetry. And maybe you're doing it on your own. Maybe you're in a class. Maybe you have discovered a group to share your stuff, because that's kind of the first impulse you get. I remember getting this impulse back in 1985. I had pretty much finished college and was looking for a place to share my poetry. And I looked in the newspaper. We used to have things called newspapers back in those days. And there was a listing in the Los Angeles Times of poetry readings. There used to be one for many years. And it gave you the information about the where and when of the event, right? So I went to some of those, met some poets, got a chance to read. And then I learned from the poets that they like to go to other venues, right? They wanted to travel to different poetry locations to share their poetry. So that in itself is a form of publication, that you go out there, you don't just keep it to yourself. You go out there and you go to readings. And really, it's an opportunity to make a name for yourself, which is part of this whole publishing game. Because after that, I noticed that these particular poets, I'm trying to remember the name of the group, it was so long ago. I think they were called the Urban Mobile Poets. I hope I'm allowed to give factual information here. I'm not going to get sued or anything. But they were the Urban Mobile Poets, and they were led by Mark Colasurdo and Marcel Brandler way back in 1985. And I joined that group. And we read at different venues as the Urban Mobile Poets. And I noticed that many of the poets that were reading had created their own chapbooks. And we're talking paper chapbooks that were done on typewriters. We used to have things called typewriters back in the 80s too. I don't know if you ever heard of them. But yeah, that was the only way, pretty much in 1985. There was a new thing that was being introduced, I think, a few years after that, and not too many years after that. It was called a word processor, which was like an electronic typewriter. Yeah. So it had the ability to do a little bit of formatting, very little. Anyway, so you make your own chapbook, and many of them were made by typing up your poems, printing, what am I saying? Typing them, they were already typed. So they're typed on a sheet of paper. There we go, I finally got that right.
Froze on us.
Think back this far. They're typed on a sheet of paper, and then what people would do to make a chapbook, they would cut the poems out of the piece of paper and either glue them or tape them to paper that was folded. I'm still getting used to this new background. There, that was folded to look like a booklet. Okay, and then it was either glued, or some people even stapled their poems. It was anything you could do to get it, you know. And so in that time, if you wanted to have multiple copies, some people would use a really archaic thing, carbon paper. I am feeling like a dinosaur right now. So you could get maybe 2 or 3 books typed up that way. But somewhere along the line, not too far after that, came printing where you could go to a store like HQ. You probably never heard of HQ. Have you heard of HQ, Mark? You got to be old to know about HQ. HQ later became a more famous name. They were acquired by another company and they became a place called Staples. You might have heard of Staples. Yeah. So like in 1989, you'd be going to HQ and getting copies made of your chapbook. That was pretty efficient, right? Because then you could have like 25, 50 of them, take them to readings and maybe sell them for $1 each or trade them. That was also a popular thing because for some reason, poets, we are not the richest people on earth. I'm still trying to figure that one out. I remember when the urban mobile poets would get together, just to get together between readings, we would like go to Mark's house and we would have a spaghetti dinner because you know how expensive it is to make a spaghetti dinner. Not, yeah, you could feed a truckload of people. There'd be like 20 people at Mark's house and we'd all be eating spaghetti and drinking a little grape juice to go with it. And that was a good old time. Memories. But time moved on. Word processors came along, and that made it possible to print out. You could print out on your printer multiple copies of your chapbook, so that was a real advance. And about that time, I noticed some chapbook presses were starting, where people were asking for submissions, and then maybe you would be selected to be one of the chapbooks they would publish. And that was a bit of an honor, right? That's a bit of a distinction there that someone chooses your chapbook over other chapbooks. So that was definitely prestigious. Now you're probably wondering, well, what about books, right? At this point, I'm trying to remember when I first encountered the opportunity to produce a book, and that seemed to be around the turn of the century for me. I think it was, yeah, around the turn of the century. I saw the first self-publishing company. It was called iUniverse, brand new company. You heard of them? Mark is nodding in affirmation. Yes, yes, yes. They were the first, and they had this special where for $99, they would publish your book, perfect bound. I'd have a copy of it. I could right over there in the bookcase behind this guy. I can whip that out and show you that it was a perfect bound book, 6x9. It had maybe a book number of pages, which would be over 60 pages. It's usually considered book length for a book of poetry. If it's 20 to 40, that's really more of a chapbook length. But there have been books published that are that small, in the 20s and the 40s in terms of numbers of poems. It is possible, but it comes out very slim. And what iUniverse did, they had their own website to try to sell your book. And of course, you could refer people to that website because there was this thing called email by then, by the 21st century. So I remember at the turn of the century, emailing, we were getting each other's emails and we would give each other information about what we're doing. And for a lot of us, starting your own press seemed to be the way to go. I remember starting a press called Sensitive Publishing, simply because that was already my email address. It was sensitive@earthlink.net. Yeah. Remember Earthlink? See? Whoa, okay. Now you guys are not as young as I thought you were. Or maybe they're still around. I don't know. But it's kind of an interesting tidbit that the mother of the founder of Earthlink is a renowned Los Angeles poet, Alice Perro. Her son founded Earthlink. So that's just a little bit of trivia there for you. Anyway, so what am I getting at? I'm getting at this. Those email lists were really the first way to market whatever it is you had to sell, chapbooks or books, and try to get people to respond. And usually what you had to do then, I don't remember there being any companies to transmit money electronically. You had to send a check or cash even. Some people did that. I remember that, getting cash in envelopes, and that worked, right? You hide it in a sheet of paper and somehow it got to you. You ever do that? Yeah, okay, that's cool, that's cool. So that was around the turn of the century. But to get that book published by a publisher, well, that took an extra step, because I've already told you that if you're reading locally, you can gain a following and sell some chapbooks of this reading, sell some chapbooks of that reading, and that's, that's not bad. You can make dinner money or gas money, and that's doing pretty good. But for a proper book, you had to go to a proper publisher, and not too many poetry publishers out there at that time. I'm trying to think of any that I can think of, and they were just the big names, right? If you wanted to get published, probably your best bet was getting an individual poem published, right? Or a small set of poems in an anthology. That was usually free to submit to. That's changed over the years now, right? Some have reading fees, especially if they put on a contest, there'll probably be a reading fee, which helps finance the contest. That's the idea there. So for a proper book, usually a fee had to be paid there, a reading fee, just to evaluate if they were interested in your book. And this was all correspondence, either by old-fashioned post or email. And we're talking turn of the century here. Now, what does a publisher want? A publisher wants a writer who has a following. And this is still true today. I'm going to turn the Wayback Machine up to the present now and say that today, pretty much everything I've said is true, except for the fact that, let's say a publisher does choose you, and there's a press that I could name that I know some friends have been published by. But I'm going to use a pseudonym for this company because I don't want to get in any trouble. So I'm going to call this company Starting Space Press, okay? That's not a real name. We'll just call it Starting Space Press. And so people who have been told by Starting Space Press that they want to be published, they submitted their manuscript, it got approved, and then came something I'm sure none of the poets expected. The press said, in order to actually produce your book, we need a list from you of 50 people willing to commit to buying the book. 50. That seemed to be the magic number for this press. Now that is a tall order, finding 50 friends committing to buy your book. You must have a following for that to work. And this is a company that made chapbooks with maybe 25 to 50 poems in them. So that is a tall order. And so what I know some of these poets did, in order to make that 50 number, right, pre-sales of 50 books, they would buy 25 books themselves to get up to 50, right? I mean, they could probably get 25 friends together to commit, and that is extraordinary. Anybody can do that. You are a popular poet. So then you make that magic number 50, your book gets produced, and as a result of that, 25 of the books go to you, 25 go to your 25 customers who already pre-bought the book. And with those 25 books that you have, you can go to readings and sell them. Or, as James mentioned earlier, you can go to a bookstore and see if they'll sell them on consignment. Many independent bookstores, there used to be a lot of independent bookstores, would do that, just that. I can think of quite a few. One comes to mind right away is Sam's Book City, that used to be in the Valley. They had a really great selection of poets' chapbooks. It was just sensational, and all in consignment. But here locally, there's a press, what am I saying press? There's a bookstore in Pasadena, a legendary independent bookstore. I don't want to say their name. I don't want to get in trouble again. But I could give them a fake name. Let's call them Roman's Bookstore. No, that's too close. Oh, I blew it. I just said Greek's Bookstore. Well, I messed up there. But I think it's safe to say, I think I can say safely that they will agree with me. They do not really feel interested in an individual's book. I mean, it has to usually come from someone who has quite the resume, like they're a professor at some college. They want a prestigious award, that sort of thing, so that will help hook in the audience to come to a publication reading at the Greek bookstore. Otherwise, they're not interested in consignment. They really aren't. And one thing I forgot to mention about consignment, you might know, the bookstore takes the lion's share of the money, right? Let us nod in affirmation at this time. Yeah, usually 60-40, 60 going to the bookstore, 40 to you. So then you got to look back and go, man, is this worth it? Yeah, because when you go to readings and you sell the books yourself, especially if you made the books yourself, if you self-published, truly self-published, like printed it on your computer or whatever, then 100% of the sales go to you. That's not shabby. But the prestige of having a name of a press on there, like Starting Space Press, helps get you some good gigs. For example, you might be able to read at a college or a college bookstore because you're on a press, and that press itself, some of these local presses, I think I can name them. They do a great job of promoting their poets. They have events like Moontide Press does that. And trying to think of the name of the other press right now that does that, also has readings. It's Juan Choi's Press. What was that?
World Stage Press.
World Stage Press. Yeah, no, that's a natural. What's beautiful about World Stage is they have a venue. So that's really a great marriage there, right? You're publishing something, you have a venue, and then you can also go to other venues and say, you know, we're World Stage Press, and we'd like to have a reading here for our poets. That's really good. Really good. That's a good way to go. So if you're hooked up with a press, right, the press likes you, you're one of their stable of poets, then you'll get an opportunity to read your poetry in several different venues and probably sell a few everywhere you go. And the one thing I'm unclear on is how that money is handled in those regards, because I've never been in exactly that situation. It's usually an anthology, and the anthology is sold by the publisher, and the publisher takes in the money. And then you have to either have an agreement, usually a contract, where the publisher says you're going to get a particular royalty depending on sales, or you have waived your right to make money on the book, and that's to support the publisher so that the anthologies get made. And then I guess it's kind of up to you if you have something else to sell. And that's really the last thing I want to bring up. Back to the original question, to self-publish or not to self-publish. When really considering this question, the number one thing you have to consider is, are you getting out there to readings so that people know who you are? If you can get to enough readings, people know who you are, then you've got a real chance of selling some books. And some groups of poets, some people, they make their own small groups. Like the Cahuenga Press poets come to mind right away. There's four poets in their group. They got a great system. What they do is they publish one of the four poets each year. So the four of them put their money together to make a perfect bound book for that poet that year. And then they do a press release, and then they organize readings. They really treat it the way a press should treat your book, right? To get the word out. And so they rotate in their group. Who gets published this year, who gets published next year, so that it's really well planned in advance, because it does take time. If you're producing your own chapbook, that doesn't take a lot of time. But if you're getting a book published by a publisher, that takes time, because there's the natural course of manuscript approval, layout approval, and then finally getting that puppy published. That could take anywhere from months to years. I know some people that are trying to publish anthologies and have them financed, because these anthologies are not cheap. They're full color with art. Very expensive to produce anthologies that would cost in the thousands to produce. So they need to raise the funds and find someone who's either a supporter of the arts that would contribute to the making of that book. So I know some people that are trying to get some books made. They're beautiful books, but it's been taking a year, 2 years, 3 years to get that to happen. That's a long time to wait. Whew, I need a break. Anybody got any questions? No, I said too much.
That was very detailed.
Yeah, I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot. I hope that it was clear enough that you could see that there are choices along the way, right? Choices along the way. And it seems that this is a universal thing. Get your individual poems published first, so that you have a collection of poems that have been published. That'll make for a nice acknowledgments page, right? It just adds more value to your book, to a publisher, that you have been previously published in many places. That's definitely the way to go first. Then you're ready.
Yeah.
Nothing to say?
Yeah, so I am in the publishing program right now. And one of the first questions I asked when I joined the program was like, hey, so, I'm joining the program to become a published poet. What kind of money am I gonna make here? Once I publish. Because I had did the self-publishing, I had made more than it cost to produce the book. So that was good. And so the answer I got back was like, most poets don't sell more than 100 copies of their poetry book in general. So then when you factor in royalties from the book that the publisher is paying out to you at 10 to 15% based on your contract, you're not getting like, six-figure kind of, book deal money. It is very limited.
There is a way to do that. The way to get six-figure money for your book, read at a presidential inauguration.
That'll do it. Yeah.
That'll do it. If Oprah sponsors you, you're in.
You're in.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. For everyone else,
there's a million that don't. Yeah.
Those are questions that they have to ask themselves. Can they create the book themselves? Do they have the ability? There are programs and there are resources if they're willing to do that. If they don't feel confident enough to do that on their own, then probably going through a publishing program where you kind of pay up front and they help you walk you through the steps and help you create the book together so that it can then be released is, another option. I did submit to a couple contests over the last year with some independent press that are really popular. And competition was well, there was a lot. So I didn't get selected for any of those, but those are a couple ways of getting with the press. But again, the person has to ask themselves what they're looking for, and what they can do on their own.
I was going to add one more thing to that. You remember I mentioned iUniverse Press. Well, they're still around, and there are other presses that are still around as well. And what they do is they have a marketing plan that you can purchase. Depending on how much you spend, is how much they do. Usually a marketing plan will cost anywhere from $500 to $1,500, depending on how widely you want your book marketed, right? So that's a lot of money up front. Most of us don't have, but that is an option. Some people have chosen that option. That is another way to go. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are people that are doing well for themselves, building a following. Definitely, if you're popular, if you already have a social media presence, and people that like your poems, like what type of work you do, and are more willing to purchase from you, then publishers are going to be more interested in taking a risk, knowing that you got a good amount of people that could potentially buy your book.
Yeah, that makes me think of a couple of poets right away. There's a poet named Kevin Ridgway, who has a great social presence on Facebook and maybe other places as far as I know, but he gets a real following there. And he submits his poetry. He's very good about submitting his poetry for individual publications. And then he gets a chapbook idea together. Like one of his latest ones was called The Purple Crayon Poems. And he gets it published by a chapbook publisher, right? So it's a small press run, and it looks like a homemade chapbook. It looks like a homemade chapbook, but it's done by a press. It's got all the markings of a press on it, even an ISBN number. It's got it all. It's just a paper chapbook, and they sell because he goes out there, gets to readings, or in this very special year, he gets to the Zoom readings, gets featured, right? And that's a great way to sell some copies. Yeah, he's very good at it. He has a lot of self-doubt, but he's a good poet.
That's a lot of poets.
Yeah.
Struggle with that self-doubt there.
Yeah. So I guess bottom line, if you're part of a scene, right? There are these little fiefdoms of poetry, particular readings, like World Stage, Beyond Baroque, the Cobalt Poets, Poetry Apocalypse, Saturday Afternoon Poetry, Laguna Poets. Every city's got a group. And if you're a member of a group, it's a chance for you to be a big fish in a little pond, which is not bad, not a bad thing. And then you can shoot to become a small fish in a big pond after that, right? Check your ambitions, see what you can do. Always good to try. There's a poet I know who is trying to do just that. She produced her own books, and then she got published by a press as a result of the notice on the books she published. And that press is promoting her. So she's reading all over the country. This is something that I remember doing back in the 90s and the early 21st century. We'll say the early 21st century because that's what I remember better. A group of us that were in our local group, we said, let's go on a road trip. Let's take our chapbooks and invade some readings. So we looked on the internet for listings of readings around the state of California, Arizona, Nevada, and Poetry Flash is a great resource for that on the internet for listings of readings around the state. and we would call them up or email them to ask if we could have an opportunity to either be featured or just be open readers. And usually the hosts are very nice people. They say, sure, come on down, you know. And they would go out of their way to help you by lauding you in front of the group, right? These people came a long way to share their poetry with you. Please support them. And they would whip out their money from their wallet and buy it from you right there on the spot just to get people encouraged. It was a very nice thing to do. And it made for a good road trip that you could definitely, it would make a huge dent in your expenses, help pay for that gas for the road trip. And of course, some readings would do collections, right? So collect money to support the features. That, you know, it's a way of getting out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is the
Also,
level of accomplishment there, right? It is. Yeah.
also, some people have built followings via slam and performance, you know, and
Yeah.
on different venues. And then YouTube has videos of them performing and stuff. And so they built an audience based on those performances. So then,
Yeah. Like who
Press
started
it.
Button Poetry, right? Button Poetry, that
Yeah.
really took off.
yeah,
Awesome. Awesome. And not everyone can do slam, but if you can, oh yeah, there's room for you.
yeah,
Oh yeah. That is a very worthwhile ambition. You want to do that?
slam.
Yeah, James,
Yeah.
you're a pretty dynamic reader.
You know, I don't think I have the slam chops.
Oh, I feel the influence is there, right? Help me, people. Help me, people. You're a good reader. Come on.
You know, maybe it depends on if I was able to get with the group that was willing to coach me and kind of teach me how to do it properly, how to compete.
That would be, yeah, yeah. Maybe
yeah.
tour.
Yeah, then that would be pretty fun. You know, LA has a slam team, San Diego has a slam team. So maybe if I move to one of those areas, you know, I could build the relationship, and that may happen. But for now, you know, not doing it right now.
Well, you're doing a great job of going to readings so people can hear you, get to know you. That's really good. That is really important. There's some poets out there who don't do that. And it's one of the things I've encountered as a host. You know, there's some people, they love going to the readings, and other people, not so much. There's some people who love to submit to the anthology. Oh, but they're kind of shy. But they get in the anthologies, right? So they make something of a name for themselves in the anthologies, right? It kind of works both ways. But if you can do both, yeah, you're going to catch more people.
Yeah, I just recently got published in the Salute to Black Man anthology by Pisces Press. So they're releasing that this month, you know, for Father's Day. So I definitely been trying to, you know, be part of more anthologies and getting out there, as well as visiting the venues.
Surveillance plane, sorry about that. All right. Hey, you brought up another thing. This is really something I totally forgot about. Before I graduated from Cal State LA, well, my very first submission for poetry was as a student to the literary magazine at Cal State LA, Statement Magazine. And the first time I was rejected. And this was in 1981, I guess. And the editor went to the trouble of giving me a typewritten note explaining to me what I needed to do. So it was both a blessing and a curse, right? It was like, oh man, I didn't make it. But I loved poetry. I didn't want to give up. So the next year, there was a new editor, right? Because there's a lot of turnover in college where people graduate. So it was a new editor. And I'd followed the advice of some people, and I got in. Well, lo and behold, they said, okay, now that you're in, we're going to have a publication reading in the library. Come on down. And out of college, wow, it's easy to get an audience there. They had 150 people attending that publication reading. You can really make a name for yourself pretty quick at the college. And after that, I joined the staff. And after you learn some things, you get your chance to be the editor, right? That's pretty good too. Pretty good too. You learn a lot. You learn how to design things and how to promote things. It was a really good educational experience. I highly recommend if you're in a college, go through the college at first.
Yeah.
Okay, that covered that base.
Well, do you have anything specifically as far as, like, I know you release and work with press to release chapbooks or anthologies, stuff like that every month. So do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I know for me personally, I've been exploiting the ability to make websites to promote the presses. Spectrum was originally the San Gabriel Valley Poetry Quarterly. So I made a website for it to notify people of calls for submissions and then who gets published and how to buy a book. And then we would have the publication reading, and that really was a win-win because people get published and the reading gets populated. So it works both ways. It's good for everyone. We get exposed to each other. We get to be a group.
Mm-hmm. That
was very wonderful. And been doing that for a long time now. But when it comes to getting published by a publisher, it seems to be more of a lonelier road. But there are groups. One comes to mind right away is Women Who Submit. I don't know if you've heard of that group, but they're very successful in getting people together so that it's not such a lonely thing, right? They meet and they bring their laptops and everybody's submitting. And I remember having some meetings at the Pasadena Library where we tried to emulate the Women Who Submit group by saying, well, let's have a publication meeting. Let's have a meeting where we're going to all submit stuff. But again, some poets are looking to publish and some aren't. Some are happy just to share it in the group and they don't come to the publication workshop. So not much you can do about that. But as an individual, definitely the Bible for us for many years was the Poets Market. Buy that every year and it would have thousands of publishers and you have to wade through it and see if any interested you. Visiting the website, of course, is a great idea because you can see what kind of poetry they're publishing. If you like it, chances are they'll like your work too. It's worth giving it a go. You don't want to just blindly send things out, especially if they're charging money.
Yeah,
that can add up. $20 here, $20 there. You know, you're out of some maybe $200 if you send to 10 publishers. So you got to be careful about that. But finding poetry that you like out there, that's a great way to go in terms of looking to publish. And when they publish you, they get to know you, and you know, they'll be open to a manuscript, right? So that's a great avenue. Yeah, that's individual work. All right. Well, we've made it to an episode that's long enough to call it an episode. Yay. And I just want to ask Lynda, if you have any questions at all, feel free to ask before we conclude. Anything you'd like to ask? Anything come to mind?
No, thank you. I mean, this has been wonderful because I think I want to say maybe the year before, so maybe around 2019, I think it was. But anyhow, Lynn Thompson had done a Beyond Baroque session on chapbook and publishing chapbooks, etc. And she wasn't really distinguishing between self-publishing and going through publishers. So when I noticed that you were going to focus on self-publishing, I thought a great opportunity to learn a little bit more, because I'm just now getting into writing again, and have been getting one or two things, submitted here and there, but not at that stage of considering publishing a chapbook. So I mean, I think this is a good opportunity to hear what you've had to say, and I think what it's done for me, and probably others who are going to watch it later, is it really is saying without saying, self-publishing is just fine and quite respectable. Because there was a point where there was a conversation out there around, oh my God, if you self-publish, then will a publisher ever look at your work? So I think this session alone, without even stating it, really says that just don't think about such things. And there are publishers who at some point will also publish you if you've been self-published. So I think this is
You made me think of one thing I forgot to mention.
Mhm.
The climate is definitely better now for self-publishing than it used to be, because the works can look just as good as the regular publishers. They really can. And let's see, I'm losing my train of thought here. If you self-publish, that's only part of the game. That's only part of it. The real deal here is get out there, read, get into groups. That's what you're doing. You make friends, make buddies, have a good time, and don't say no to opportunities, because they do come along in groups. There'll be anthologies, readings, special events. Next thing you know, you're swimming in it. Yeah.
Spectrum has a call coming up, right? This month, and then the special edition.
That's right. And Poetic Diversity is a great place to publish. Marie Lecravain's website has published hundreds of poets, Southern California poets in particular. It's really well read. I noticed that when I Google myself, what? Googling yourself? Yes, it's something to do, to see which of your published poems are getting read more than the others, right? Which websites are getting read more than the others. And so I continue to submit to Poetic Diversity, because that's one that gets read. It really gets read. And there are others out there as well. I just can't name them off the top of my head, but I also remember some publishers actually expressing that they like your work and they want more, and they would publish multiple poems every time. And that's just wow, that's just nothing better, nothing better. You're feeling accepted, getting read. You can Google yourself and there are actual entries. Yeah.
Surprisingly, I was in my poetry class, and someone in the class was like, so we talk about what book we're reading. Someone in the class was like, I'm reading James's book. And I was like, what? And so the instructor for the class was like, yeah, James is Googleable. And I was like,
that means he's been published here and there. That's cool. Yeah.
I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I was, but awesome.
Yeah, if they Google James Coates, I think he won a slam. He tied with someone in a poetry slam that was held just a couple of months ago. Yeah. What was that called? The San Gabriel Valley Poetry Festival.
Yeah.
Right, Sharon Smith Knight and you are both very good. Very good. That was the most deserving of ties.
that's going on the resume.
Hey, the next step up there is when people start putting Google alerts on James Coates. I don't know if you're familiar with the Google alerts, right? And so, yep. And you'll start coming in frequently, and there you go.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to wrap it up. I think we said a lot, and I hope this gives people the encouragement to try to publish. Definitely try to publish any way you can. Don't say no to poetry. Poetry is good to us in many ways, individually and collectively. So I'm going to reach for that button now to stop this recording. Here we go, and we're free.